Ideas aren't enough. You can spend every day writing down dozens of ideas and still not really be going anywhere. Ideas are step one. Then you have to develop them. Take that idea and turn it into something bigger, something that can become a full story. I spent years trying to force fully realized stories out of underdeveloped ideas, and spoiler alert, they sucked. Now, there's no one formula for how to develop a story idea. Unfortunately, each individual story is gonna need something different, but you can start to come up with some questions to ask, some kind of framework for where to go, and then your story will start to kind of tell you what you need to know next. You just have to give it a chance and be really intentional about that process. For me, I think it's really important to write everything out. I like to get everything out of my head and onto the page, and then I can always organize it. Now, that may not be how I do things in the future. I am still working on my style and the way that I go about planning scripts, but every time I do it, I get better at it, and I found that one of the most important things is writing things down. It's important to clarify the background of your story, what's going on behind the scenes, what's building the world that the story takes place in. Even though the story starts at point A, it doesn't erase all of the history behind it. So you need to be aware of the entire world, the entire story, even things that won't necessarily make it on screen at any point, because the more that you know and the more that you understand, the more there is to pull from, the more real the story and the world is going to feel. I always think it's a really powerful moment when you start to really connect to the characters in the story you want to tell. When you can really understand where all of them are coming from, you understand their motivations and their thoughts and their behaviors, that's when I feel like I really clicked into a story. And on top of that, it can help you see what perspective this story is being told from, whose eyes the audience is going to see through. And on that note, it's really important to think about the organization of the story. How do you want to tell the story? Is it going to really focus on one character? Is there going to be a lot of characters that it kind of goes back and forth between? Do you want to tell the story linearly? Or do you want to have flashbacks? Do you want to have flash forwards? There are a lot of different ways you can go about telling a story. The story itself is not necessarily the only thing that can be unique about the story. How you go about telling your story can make such a huge difference in how it's received. You also want to start thinking about the arcs. Again, different stories are going to need different things, even just different types of stories. So a feature is going to have different arcs and needs than a pilot and a series. But what are the big growths that this story is going to have, that the characters are going to have? Where are they going to be changed from where they started? And remember, you don't have to start them in a place you want them to be. You just have to know where they're going and make sure that where they start is on the path of that journey. It's also really important to get in touch with why you're telling this story. And it doesn't have to be some grand reason. You don't have to pour your trauma out onto the page. This doesn't have to be the most important story you've ever written. If that is what the story is, nothing wrong with that. But I feel like sometimes we get caught up because there doesn't feel like there's a big enough why. It's not this world-changing thing. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be. If your why is, I think this is a really funny idea, that's enough. You just want to be in touch with what it is, have it defined for yourself, and so you can rely on that as you go through this process. It doesn't have to be anything bigger than that if it's just not. And now I have some bad news. Developed ideas aren't enough either. Yeah, they're only step 2. And there's too many steps to count without getting overwhelmed. So let's just move you on to step 3, which is first drafts. I know they're terrifying. They make me want to break out in a sweat, but it's really important to go through them intentionally and move on from there so you can avoid sticking on the first draft for months and months and months because it's so daunting. So go ahead and watch that video next. I break it all down. I talk about what I used to do in the past, what I've learned from it, and how I'm able to just swiftly move through a first draft and keep on going.